On the 18th of October, something subtle begins to shift. It's not loud, not visible to others, but deep inside you. There's a quiet realization that you've been carrying something heavy for far too long. A sadness that doesn't scream, but whispers. A weight that you've learned to hide behind smiles, behind work, behind pretending you're okay. This day doesn't come to expose your pain. It comes to show you that it's time to stop ignoring it. You see, sadness doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always arrive in tears. Sometimes it hides behind your silence, behind your constant effort to stay busy, to stay distracted. But 18th of October is a reminder that healing begins when you stop running. When you finally sit down and allow yourself to feel what's been waiting inside you. That quiet ache that has been with you for years, it only wants to be seen. It doesn't want judgment. It just wants your attention. We live in a world where everyone tells you to move on, stay positive, keep going. But healing is not about pretending that everything is fine. Healing is about acknowledging what isn't. It's about facing the truth that you've been carrying something alone and that it's okay to be tired of it. On this day, the air itself seems to whisper, let it be seen, not by others, but by you. When you begin to recognize the sadness you've been carrying, something changes. Awareness breaks the illusion that you are trapped inside it. You begin to see that your pain is not your identity. It's just an experience. You are not your sadness. You are the one who witnesses it. And this witnessing is the start of freedom. There's beauty in being honest with yourself. There's power in saying, yes, I am hurting, and that's okay. 18th of October is not asking you to heal overnight. It's not asking you to erase what happened. It's only asking for truth, your truth, because truth brings peace, and peace brings release. You may think that nobody understands what you're carrying, and maybe they don't, but you do. You understand it more than anyone. And that understanding, that quiet recognition is what starts to loosen the grip of sorrow. When you stop fighting the feeling, when you stop trying to hide it from yourself, it starts to soften, like ice melting under sunlight. That sunlight is awareness. There's a kind of strength that grows only in silence. When you sit with your pain instead of running from it, it begins to reveal its lessons. You realize that sadness is not your enemy. It's a teacher. It teaches you depth. It teaches you empathy. It teaches you what it means to truly be human. On the 18th October, you begin to see that this quieted sadness was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to shape you. You have been through things that changed you. You've had moments that broke your rhythm, that took pieces of you away. But even in all that, you kept going. You adapted. You endured. And now, this moment, this day, invites you to stop surviving and start healing, to stop numbing the pain and start listening to it. Because the moment you listen, it transforms. It's not weakness to feel deeply. It's not a flaw to be soft. The world may have convinced you that strength means suppression, but the truth is real strength means honesty. To admit that you are not always okay, to admit that you feel empty sometimes, to admit that you're tired. That's not failure. That's courage. 18th of October asks for that courage, the courage to feel without fear. When you allow your sadness to exist, you begin to understand yourself more clearly. You see patterns, memories, choices, all the ways you tried to protect yourself. You see the moments when you closed your heart to stay safe. And now, gently, you can start opening it again. Not because the world is softer, but because you have become stronger. Every quiet night, every tear you hid, every time you smiled when you didn't want to. All of it becomes part of your growth. It becomes part of the story of how you learn to see yourself. On this 18th October, that story starts to shift. It's no longer about endurance, it's about awakening. You realize that sadness does not define your future. Awareness does. The journey of healing doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for presence, to be here fully with whatever you feel. Because once you stop fighting yourself, the storm inside begins to calm. Slowly, You breathe deeper. You think clearer. You see life again, not as something to escape from, but as something to live through. Let this day remind you that it's okay to rest. It's okay to pause and look at yourself with compassion. The pain that once felt like a curse begins to reveal itself as a message that you are still alive, still capable of feeling, still capable of love. 18th October is not just a date, it's an awakening, a quiet turning point inside your heart. The moment when you realize that even the heaviest sadness can be healed not by others, but by your own gentle acceptance, by the way you hold your truth without fear, by the way you choose to see your pain as part of your path, not the end of it. You don't need to explain it to anyone. You don't need to justify what you feel. Just breathe, just allow. Because when you stop hiding from your sadness, you stop hiding from yourself. And that is where true healing begins. On this day, you finally understand you were never broken. You were only waiting to be seen. On 18th October, the meaning of awareness becomes clearer. It is not just about noticing your sadness or pain. It is about feeling it fully without judgment, without resistance. Awareness is the quiet act of looking within and saying, this is what lives inside me right now. Not trying to fix it, not trying to escape it, just seeing it as it is. On this day, you begin to understand that awareness is the doorway through which healing enters. Without awareness, nothing changes. With it, everything does. You have spent so much time running from the feelings you did not want to face. You covered them with distractions, with noise, with work, with people. You thought that if you stayed busy enough, the sadness would disappear, but it didn't. It only learned to live deeper in the quiet corners of your being. On the 18th October, that hiding ends. The light of awareness begins to touch those dark corners softly but powerfully. And in that moment, something inside you begins to release. Awareness is not a loud revelation. It is silent, but it moves mountains within. It is when you finally stop fighting your emotions and begin to observe them. You don't ask why. You don't label them as good or bad. You simply see them. The pain, the fear, the memories. You allow them to exist in your awareness without trying to change them. This is the beginning of real healing because healing does not come from control. It comes from presence. On the 18th October, you learn that awareness is a form of love. When you are aware of yourself, you are no longer rejecting what you feel. You are no longer abandoning your inner world. You are saying, why I'm here, even for the parts of me that hurt. That simple act of being here fully begins to soften the hard edges inside you. The sadness that once felt unbearable starts to lose its power, not because it disappears, but because you are no longer afraid of it. Awareness transforms your relationship with pain. It teaches you that emotions are not enemies, they are messages. Each feeling carries wisdom, a story about where you've been, what you've ignored, and what you still need to see. When you stop numbing yourself, you start learning from these messages. You begin to see that sadness often appears when the soul is asking for your attention. It is not punishment, it is communication. And on this 18th October, you finally begin to listen. Awareness doesn't require effort. It requires honesty. It is not about doing more. It's about being more present. Sit quietly, breathe deeply, and feel the space between your thoughts. That space is awareness, pure, untouched, infinite. The more you rest there, the more your pain begins to unfold. It shows you its roots. It reveals the fears that shaped it. And slowly, your understanding deepens. What you used to run from now becomes your teacher. On this day, 18th October, awareness becomes your mirror. You begin to see how often you've lived on autopilot, reacting, rushing, avoiding. You start to realize how many emotions you've buried simply because they were uncomfortable. But the truth is, nothing truly disappears until it's faced. Awareness allows you to face it, not with force, but with compassion. It is the gentle courage to say, I see you, to every part of yourself. When you bring awareness to your sadness, you bring light to the darkness, and light changes everything. It doesn't need to fight the dark. It simply reveals what's there. You begin to notice that the sadness you feared so much was never infinite. It had boundaries, and those boundaries dissolve when touched by awareness. The moment you become aware, you become free, because now your pain no longer controls you. You are awake to it, and awakening is liberation. On the 18th October, awareness becomes the seed of transformation. You understand that healing isn't something you achieve. It's something that happens naturally when you are aware. Just like the body heals when you stop harming it, the mind heals when you stop resisting it. All you have to do is remain present, to breathe through the discomfort instead of running from it. Slowly, the heaviness begins to shift into lightness, into peace. There's something sacred about seeing yourself clearly. When you become aware, you begin to forgive yourself, not through words, but through understanding. You realize that you did what you could with the awareness you had back then. You begin to see how every wound was a call to awaken. And now, on this day, you are answering that call. You are choosing to live with open eyes, open heart, and steady breath. Awareness also teaches patience. Healing doesn't rush. It moves in its own rhythm, one that cannot be forced. But the more you stay aware, the more natural that rhythm becomes. You begin to trust the process. You begin to trust yourself. The sadness that once felt endless starts to transform into clarity, into quiet strength that doesn't depend on circumstances. On the 18th of October, awareness becomes your sanctuary. You no longer need to escape life to find peace. You create peace by being fully aware of life. The noise outside no longer defines you. The chaos inside no longer scares you. You simply watch it all like waves rising and falling on the ocean. The awareness beneath those waves, that stillness, is you. When awareness deepens, acceptance follows. You stop wishing for a different past, a different story. You begin to see that everything that happened shaped your understanding, your compassion, your depth. The sadness that once closed your heart now opens it wider. You start to live with more softness, more gratitude, more truth. 18th October becomes the day you remember how powerful it is to see, not to fix, not to escape, but to see with presence and tenderness. Because awareness itself is healing. You don't have to force it, you just have to be with it. And as you remain aware, the sadness begins to dissolve, not into emptiness, but into light, into peace, into the quiet knowing that you are finally home within yourself. On the 18th of October, something inside begins to loosen. The tension that has been holding your sadness in place, the quiet resistance that has kept you trapped in the same emotions for years. You start to see that what keeps pain alive is not the pain itself, but your refusal to let it move. Every time you tighten your chest to stop the feeling, every time you say, I'm fine. When you are not, you build another wall around yourself. But walls don't protect you, they imprison you. This day arrives as a reminder that letting go is not weakness. It is the most powerful act of healing. For so long, you have been fighting your emotions, trying to control them, trying to understand them, trying to make them disappear. But 18th and October comes to teach you something different, that control is an illusion. The harder you hold on, the more the pain resists. The more you suppress it, the deeper it roots itself. Healing begins when you release control, when you allow your emotions to flow like water without judging them, without forcing them into silence. You don't need to fix every feeling. You only need to let it move through you. Emotions are like energy. They are meant to flow. When you resist, you trap that energy inside. You may feel it as tightness in your body, as heaviness in your chest, as a quiet restlessness that never goes away. But when you finally surrender, when you breathe deeply and stop fighting what you feel, the body starts to soften. The mind starts to quiet. The storm begins to settle. On the 18th of October, that surrender becomes your liberation. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means accepting that you cannot force peace to come. You create the space for it. You do this by releasing the grip you have on how life should be, how people should behave, how your past should have gone. You stop trying to rewrite what already happened and start trusting the wisdom in what did. You stop asking for control and start asking for understanding. That shift is where freedom begins. You see, sadness only lingers because you resist it. It feeds on the story you tell about it. The blame, the guilt, the self-judgment. You say, this shouldn't have happened. And in doing so, you stay attached to it. But when you let go of the story, when you stop arguing with what was, the sadness begins to fade. It has nothing left to hold on to. On this 18th October, life is whispering to you, stop holding the wound so tightly. It doesn't need to be carried anymore. The moment you release resistance, the energy of your sadness transforms. What once felt like a weight begins to turn into clarity. You start to see how every experience, even the painful ones, brought you closer to understanding yourself. You realize that nothing was ever against you. It was shaping you. And that understanding brings peace deeper than any explanation ever could. Letting go is not a one-time act. It is a daily practice. Every morning you wake up, you have a choice to carry the old pain again or to breathe and release it. On 18th of October, you begin to choose release. You begin to let go of the expectations that keep you tense, the disappointments that haunt your thoughts, the mistakes that repeat in your mind. You learn that the only thing you ever needed to control was your willingness to surrender. Sometimes we resist because we are afraid that if we let go, we will lose a part of ourselves. But you don't lose anything real by releasing pain. You only lose what was never meant to stay. You lose the noise. You lose the heaviness. You lose the false belief that you are broken. And what remains is your truth, light, calm, unshaken. On this day, you realize that letting go is not about forgetting the past, it's about freeing your energy from it. When resistance fades, life flows again. Your breath becomes deeper, your steps lighter, your thoughts clearer. You stop overthinking everything. You stop needing answers for every wound. You begin to trust the quiet wisdom that lives within you. Healing becomes simple, breathe, feel, release, again and again, until peace becomes your natural state. On the 18th of October, you also begin to see that resistance doesn't only live in your emotions. It lives in your thoughts. The thoughts that say, I can't. I'm not enough. I should be over this by now. These are chains disguised as self-discipline. You have believed them for so long that they became your truth. But today, you start to see that they were never true. The moment you stop believing those thoughts, you stop resisting yourself. And when you stop resisting yourself, love returns. There is no force stronger than the one who no longer resists their own heart. You stop running from your pain and start walking with it. You begin to see it not as an enemy, but as part of your path. Every tear, every moment of confusion, every night you couldn't sleep, they were all part of your transformation. They were breaking down your resistance, preparing you for peace. The beauty of 18th October lies in its silence. It doesn't demand action. It invites stillness. It whispers, you don't have to fight anymore. And in that stillness, you feel something you may have forgotten. Softness. That softness is your true strength. It allows you to bend without breaking, to feel without drowning, to move forward without carrying the past. Letting go is not the end of something. It is the beginning of something lighter, purer, freer. The moment you stop resisting your sadness, it turns into wisdom. The moment you stop holding your pain, it turns into strength. You become the calm that once felt impossible. On the 18th of October, you step into that calm, not because life suddenly became easier, but because you finally stopped fighting with yourself. This is the quiet freedom that comes from surrender. This is the peace that lives beneath resistance. You don't need to chase it. You only need to let it in. And as you do, the sadness that once felt endless begins to fade into silence. The silence of acceptance, the silence of peace, the silence of a heart that has finally learned to let go. On the 18th of October, you begin to see sadness differently. It no longer feels like a punishment or a shadow you must hide from. It begins to appear as something else, a mirror, a quiet teacher that has been guiding you all along. The pain you once tried to bury starts to speak, and what it says is not meant to hurt you. It's meant to awaken you. Every wound you've carried was never meant to break you. It was meant to show you what still needed to be understood inside yourself. You start to see how the moments that brought you to your knees were also the moments that carved depth into your soul. The heartbreak, the silence, the loneliness, they taught you what peace truly means. Without pain, you would never have learned stillness. Without loss, you would never have discovered gratitude. Without sadness, you would never have known compassion. 18th October comes to remind you that your pain was never your enemy. It was your initiation into awareness. When you stop labeling sadness as weakness, everything inside you changes. You begin to walk differently through life. You no longer hide from your emotions. You allow them to teach you. You start to see that every tear that ever fell from your eyes was not a sign of defeat, but a symbol of growth. It meant your heart was still open. It meant you were still alive. It meant you were still willing to feel even when the world taught you to numb. That is strength, quiet, sacred, unshakable. On this 18th October, you understand that true power doesn't come from control. It comes from vulnerability, from being brave enough to feel everything and still choose peace. You learn that the strongest people are not those who never fall apart. They are those who have the courage to rebuild themselves piece by piece. The cracks in your heart become openings for light to enter. The more you face your sadness, the more light you allow in. Pain is a sculptor. It shapes you in silence. It takes the rawness of your emotions and carves out the version of you that is meant to emerge softer, wiser, more awake. You begin to realize that every hardship was training you to see beyond surface level happiness. You were being guided towards something more real, a grounded, inner joy that cannot be taken away. That kind of joy only comes after you've met your pain and chosen not to run from it. On the 18th October, you start to walk with your pain instead of against it. You no longer ask it to leave. You ask it to show you what it came to teach. You find that beneath the ache is understanding, beneath the tears is forgiveness, and beneath the silence is peace. You see that pain was never meant to be an obstacle. It was meant to open the door to a deeper connection with yourself. Every experience that hurt you carried a lesson. Maybe it taught you patience. Maybe it taught you to slow down, to listen, to honor your limits. Maybe it showed you the importance of truth, the value of letting go, the beauty of starting again. These are not small lessons. They are the foundation of inner strength. On 18th October, you begin to thank your sadness for making you human enough to learn them. When you stop fighting pain, it stops fighting back. It becomes your companion in growth. It guides you toward clarity. It removes what doesn't belong, the illusions, the ego, the noise, and what remains is something simple but powerful: authenticity. You begin to live from truth, not from fear. You stop trying to appear strong and start being strong in silence. This transformation is not dramatic on the outside. It happens quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You notice that you react less. You forgive faster. You breathe deeper. The sadness that once felt endless becomes softer, more like an old friend that reminds you where you've been and how far you've come. 18th October becomes the turning point, the day you stop seeing yourself as a victim of your pain and start recognizing yourself as its student. Every time you rise after being broken, you grow a little wiser. Every time you love again after being hurt, your heart expands. Every time you let go of what you cannot change, you create space for peace to enter. This is the transformation that pain offers. Not through destruction, but through refinement. Pain polishes the rough edges of the soul until what remains is clarity, humility, and compassion. On this 18th October, you are reminded that sadness is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of your strength. It's the soil in which resilience grows. Without sadness, there would be no tenderness in your voice, no empathy in your heart, no wisdom in your silence. You start to appreciate the depth that comes from feeling deeply. You understand that those who have suffered without closing their hearts carry a kind of light that can never be dimmed. You no longer chase a life without pain. You seek a life with meaning. And meaning often comes wrapped in discomfort, in loss, in moments that stretch the soul beyond its comfort. But you no longer fear that stretch. You welcome it. You know now that pain refines you, not ruins you. It removes what is false so that what is true can remain. By the time this day ends, you begin to breathe differently. The same sadness that once felt heavy now feels sacred. You carry it not as a burden, but as wisdom. You walk lighter because you no longer resist what life brings. You move forward with quiet dignity and knowing that everything that once hurt you has prepared you for this peace. 18th October becomes more than a date. It becomes a revelation, the moment when you finally understand that pain was never against you. It was your silent guide, shaping you into someone softer, stronger, and infinitely more awake. You stand taller not because life became easier, but because you have learned to see beauty even in the ache. That is real strength, born not from victory, but from understanding. On the 18th October, you begin to understand that healing doesn't always come with noise, tears, or great realizations. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the smallest, most ordinary moments. A deep breath, a soft sunrise, the sound of rain against your window. Healing is not something you chase, it's something you allow. It comes when you stop trying to escape life and begin to reconnect with it gently and truthfully. This day teaches you that peace is not found in grand changes, but in small returns. The return to yourself, to presence, to simplicity. You realize how long you have been disconnected from the essence of life, the rush of daily routines, the constant thinking, the endless searching for meaning. All of it created distance between you and your own being. 18th October invites you to close that distance, to slow down, to breathe, to remember that you are not separate from the world around you, you are a part of it. The air you breathe, the ground you walk on, the light that touches your face, they are all extensions of the same stillness that lives inside you. Reconnection doesn't demand effort, it demands awareness. You don't have to climb mountains or seek enlightenment to feel alive again. You just have to notice. Notice how the morning feels against your skin. Notice the rhythm of your heartbeat when you are calm. Notice the silence between sounds. That noticing is not trivial, it's sacred. It's how you begin to return home to yourself. 18th October is the reminder that peace was never lost. You simply stopped paying attention to it. The world has taught you to believe that healing means doing more, reading more, fixing more, becoming more. But true healing asks for the opposite. It asks you to stop, to listen, to allow space for life to breathe through you again. It's in those pauses, those moments of stillness, that your inner balance begins to rebuild itself. On the 18th of October, the noise inside starts to fade, and in that silence, you feel something pure, calm, untouched, whole. When you reconnect with simplicity, life begins to make sense again. The mind, which was once filled with endless questions, starts to soften. You no longer seek meaning in complicated ideas. You find it in the way sunlight moves across your room, in the way the wind brushes through the trees, in the way your breath deepens without you asking it to. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the peace that was always within you. This day teaches that gentleness is not weakness, it is wisdom. To live gently is to move through life without resistance. It's to act without forcing, to speak without rushing, to love without fear. When you walk with gentleness, you stop fighting the world, and in return, the world stops fighting you. 18th October becomes a turning point where you finally allow softness to guide you, not as a fragile thing, but as a powerful force of balance. Healing does not demand that you erase your sadness. It asks that you hold it differently, with compassion, with patience, with understanding. You stop asking the pain to leave, and instead you create space for it to exist peacefully within you. It becomes part of your story, not as a wound, but as wisdom. You see that life was never about avoiding the dark. It was about learning to walk through it with light in your hands. On the 18th of October, that light begins to glow quietly inside you. As you reconnect, you also begin to notice how nature mirrors your own healing. The trees don't rush to grow, they expand when the season allows. The ocean doesn't resist its waves, it flows naturally between calm and storm. The sun doesn't chase the moon, it simply rises when it's time. You too are a part of this rhythm. Healing happens in cycles, not in straight lines. You don't need to force it, you just need to stay open. 18th of October becomes a moment to realign with this truth, to understand that the body, the heart, and the spirit all know how to heal if you give them the space. You do this by resting when you need rest, by breathing deeply when the world feels heavy, by choosing silence over noise, presence over distraction, truth over pretense. You begin to live slower, but with more awareness. Every step you take carries more meaning. Every thought you have becomes lighter. In reconnecting, you also rediscover gratitude. You start to notice how much life has already given you, the people who stayed, the lessons that shaped you, the strength that grew in silence. You stop waiting for perfection and start cherishing the simplicity of now. Gratitude becomes your grounding force. It turns even ordinary moments into sacred ones. On the 18th of October, you see clearly that peace was never far. It was always in the moments you took for granted. Healing through reconnection also means remembering that you are never truly alone. The stillness of the world around you is alive with presence. Every breath connects you to everything else breathing. Every step touches the same earth walked by millions before you. You begin to understand that solitude is not emptiness, it is communion. When you sit in silence, you are not abandoned by life, you are embraced by it. By the end of this day, you begin to carry yourself differently. You move slower, but with more intention. You speak softer, but with more meaning. The need to prove, to chase, to struggle begins to fade. You no longer look for healing as something outside of yourself. You see that it lives in how you treat the moment, how you sit, how you breathe, how you love. 18th of October becomes the quiet reminder that life doesn't need to be extraordinary to be beautiful. Peace doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It blooms in the midst of imperfection. Healing doesn't arrive through force. It flows through surrender. You learn that the art of gentle reconnection is the art of being human, of allowing yourself to be touched by life again, fully and fearlessly. And so the sadness you once carried begins to dissolve, not with effort, but with awareness. You don't heal by running from yourself. You heal by returning to yourself softly, patiently, truthfully. On this 18th October, you finally understand that the peace you've been searching for has always been here, waiting for you to notice it, waiting for you to come home.